In presenting the report and the statement of accounts for the year which ended on the 31st March last, the chairman said, as you will have seen from the report which has been circulated to you, your company has enjoyed a record year's trading. It is particularly satisfactory to be able to state that all of our departments have contributed towards this happy result. Our sales have gone ahead well, and our manufacturing efficiency has reached a very high level. It is very gratifying to note that our expense ratio has fallen. This is a very creditable performance when it is remembered that costs are still continuing to rise. The drop in the expense ratio is due to good planning and to an efficiency drive throughout all our branches. In fact, our position is so good in this respect that I can sum it up by saying that we have achieved a sales increase of more than 6 million rupees without any increase in the staff employed. That fully explains the increase in our profit figure for the year under review. We have this year prepared a booklet called A Review of the Company's Activities, and this has been circulated to all the shareholders. It has therefore not been necessary for me to make my statement to the shareholders quite as lengthy as unusual. If you have not read this booklet already, I ask you to do so, as I am sure you will find It is most absorbing summary of the work of this great organization. Our total sales at home and abroad amounted to nearly 90 million rupees. This figure represents an increase of 8% over last year and is a truly magnificent achievement. The figure of profit before providing for taxation amounts to 7.5 million rupees. This is an increase of 49% over last year's figure and is a remarkable increase to achieve in the course of 1 year, as indicated in the financial section of a review of the company's activities. The profit gained on the capital employed by the company amounted to almost 15%. This figure reflects the benefit of substantial capital expenditure over a long period of years and is not, in the circumstances, unreasonable. There has been continued rise in the property values and many of our freeholds are still undervalued. It is not an easy matter to give an exact definition of the efficient secretary, but I will deal with the question to the best of my ability. She should have speeds of at least 120 words a minute in shorthand and 60 words a minute in typewriting, and have had a good education, the ability to use the English language correctly is a valuable asset. It would be useful to her employer if she had a knowledge of accounts and could do arithmetic so far as experience is concerned, she should have spent at least 2 years as a shorthand typist. This would ensure that there would be no worries about the work of shorthand typing. Turning to the personal qualities, two of the main items are tact and discretion. These qualities are of very great importance. Thus, type of work involves dealing with matters which would be of interest to other people. She should not discuss her employer's business outside the office, and if, when questioned by an outsider, her knowledge of a subject appears to be limited, it is far better that this should be the case than that she should try to answer the question so far as common sense is concerned, although it does not appear as a school subject. A girl should use her common sense in whatever work is allotted to her. Loyalty to an employer calls for the sacrifice of one's time. When work is required to be done within a certain period, the shorthand typist could live a better hour until the following day. If the day's time had run out, but the trained person knows the importance of her work and shows her loyalty by finishing it when required. An equitable temper is another person quality which is of great importance. The secretary should be ready to accept blame, but only if it is deserved. It is essential that she should be punctual, and this quality is of very great importance throughout our life. In whatever we may be doing, If every employee decided to be 10 minutes late each day, production would be out to such an extent that some of the large firms would lose thousands of rupees per annum. The private secretary should be able to do much of the work usually done by her employer. He wishes to delegate some of his routine work to her. Over the past several years, approximately 57% of those who work in this country have been engaged in manufacturing, agriculture, transportation, utilities, and construction activities. 43% have been engaged in trades and services with the supposed increased productivity per working hour. It is estimated that only 51% of the workers will be needed to do the work which formerly required 57%. This means that an additional 6% of the workers will be able to go into the trades and services, so that practically one half of the working population will be devoting their working hours to wholesale and retail distribution, machine servicing, and various types of personal and professional services. This change in the number of workers needed in the various occupations has, of course, definite implications for education. More people will have to prepare themselves for trades and services, and with the coming of industrialization, more will have to prepare for scientific and technological work. Fewer and fewer unskilled and semi-skilled workers will be needed in order to design machines, to prepare the necessary guides for their machine operation and to repair them. An individual must obviously have a high level of technical training. In addition, long range planning will become increasingly necessary. The management in business and industry must understand people, their needs and desires in order to plan intelligently. Therefore, many educators believe that the skilled worker of the future will need a broad, general educating, increased efficiency result in either a high standard of living, fewer working hours, or both. Labor leaders, industrialists, and businessmen disagree somewhat concerning the effects of industrialization. Consequently, there appears to be an expected decrease in the number workers of this time, from which a large section of our worker is now drawn. Because of these statistics, many people are thankful that our production efficiency is rapidly improving with the higher birth rates of the year since Second World War. The number of workers should increase appreciably. Undoubtedly, we will then find that even with an increasingly high standard of living, fewer hours per week per worker will be required. Therefore, education must recognize not only that more people ought to be trained for trades and services, and that those who are in technical study ought to develop wide scope, better judgment, and greater suitability. Gentlemen, I will, as usual, take the report and accounts as read, as these have been in your hands for several days. The report covers the working of the company in some detail, and it is not only necessary for me Now to go into very great detail, the problem of sugar has always become a headache to the consumers as well as to the government. Sometimes it is due to less production of sugar, and sometimes it is due to abnormal increase in prices. In the present days, the upward trend of increase in price has reached such a high level that it has never touched before. At present, the sugar is being sold at rupees 8 per kilogram. Not only sugar, but the prices of all essential commodities, it is observed, have gone up far beyond the limits the common man could reasonably bear. Sugar dealers are heard to say that the cost of sugar would still go up to the level of rupees 12 per kilogram shortly. The whole picture is causing much anxiety to the consumers. It is true that the sugar is sold at a cheaper rate on ration cards through the authorized ration shops, but it is so inadequate that it hardly const- hardly constitutes 10% of their normal consumption, and the balance 90% they are forced to purchase from the open market at a very heavy cost, because the cost of sugar has gone up so high. The prices of sweets made of sugar have also gone up to unprecedented heights. The sugar manufacturers say that the sugar cane required for manufacturing sugar is not available in sufficient quantity, with the result that they cannot produce sugar in as much quantity as is necessary to meet the full requirements of the consumers. This is one of the main reasons of the sugar being sold at heavy cost in the present days. Whatever may be their reasons to justify this extraordinary steep rise in the price of sugar, the consumers of average means are very badly hit. To reduce the hardships of the consumers, the government have decided to import sugar from outside the country. Some consignments of sugar have actually arrived in the country and is distributed on limited basis on ration cards through the authorized ration shops. The intention behind this idea was evidently to assist in reducing the high prices of sugar manufactured in the country, but in actual effect, this object does not appear to have been fulfilled. The sugar prices are at the same level as before. This goes to show that the tendency of traders is not helpful towards reducing the hardships of consumers, and they are following their own ways. Ladies and gentlemen, you have all had a copy of the accounts and of the director's report, and with your approval, I propose that we take them as read. The main function of the post office is to collect letters posted by the public, sort and dispatch them to the various destinations where these can be delivered to the addresses at the post office counter. Letters and parcels are accepted for registration and insurance. Money orders are issued. Savings bank transactions are made, and other transactions like broadcast, receiver, licenses, payment of telephone revenue bills, sale of revenue stamps, etc. are undertaken. The post office is primarily intended for the common man. It has been the constant endeavor for the department to ensure that the customer is served politely and promptly by delivering his mail speedily at his residence and helping him to put through his transactions quickly at the post office counter. At the time of India's independence, there were about 20,000 post offices in India, and many of the villagers had to walk very long distance to the nearest post office for their transactions. It was therefore decided to increase the number of post offices, especially in the rural areas, and at the end of last year there were 1 lakh post offices in India. About 80% of them being in the rural areas, barring in a few cases. Now no villager need walk more than 2 miles to reach the nearest post office for his transactions. Letter boxes are planted in most of the important villages, and these are cleared at periodical intervals. The department fully realizes that the time of the customer is very precious in these days, when the common man is made to wait in queue in bus stop, ration shops, hospitals, and when every effort is made in the post office to see that the customer's transactions are completed quickly and politely. Service with a smile has been our motto in big offices in urban areas, where separate counters are provided for different transactions. It has been observed that a member of the public has often to go to 2 or 3 counters for completing one transaction. For example, if he wants to register a letter, he has to go to the inquiry or registration counter to get it weighed, then go to the stamp vendor's counter for getting the stamps, and finally go to the registration counter for registering the article. To avoid these difficulties, we have provided franking machines at the registration counter of important offices. The whole object of a plan is to assess realistically the potential for development and to spell out in advance the problems likely to be faced in realizing it. The analysis made from this angle in the plan documents show that while we should not pitch our expectations in regard to improvement in the standard of living too high, at the same time we need not be unduly pessimistic in regard to the possibilities of growth. The very constraint of resources which we faced during the period intervening between the fifth and the sixth plan has sharpened our sense of priorities and has facilitated the concentration of our energies and resources on vital programs. We are all aware of the importance of agriculture in the national life of India. It was the new agricultural methods based on the use of extensive application of fertilizers and remunerative prices for farm produce, which gave us a measure of success, and this was due as much to our scientists and technicians as to the farmers themselves and to their quick response to new ideas. About 80% of the commodity consumption of households is comprised of agricultural raw materials. The achievement of the targets of growth under conditions of price stability will therefore depend entirely on the growth of agricultural production at the pace envisaged. This order of growth of agricultural production should also enable us to do away with food imports on concessional terms. You must have therefore noticed that the total turnover has increased rupees 54 crores in 1977 to 78 to rupees 59 crores. The gross profit has risen from rupees 6 crores to 8 crores. You will recollect that the rate of dividend was stepped up last year on the passing of had been one of our directors for the past 18 years. He joined this company just 2 years after its establishment, at a time when company was still struggling for its own existence. Since then, wholeheartedly devoted himself to the growth and progress of the company, and I must say that the prominence which we enjoy in our field today is due to, in a large measure, to his efforts and foresight. His loss will be keenly felt by all of us, especially when we are proposing to take up new expansion programs. As regards the director's report and the audited accounts, the same have been in your hands for several days. I am sure you will have by now formed your opinion as to the results that have been put before you. It is indeed a matter of great pleasure to your board to be able to present to you accounts which show a profit of rupees 20 lakhs during the year under review. The amount of the profit has been arrived at after making full provision for the taxes payable by your company and its other commitments. Though this profit is not very high, especially when compared with the last year's figure, I must say it is very satisfactory and represents an increased turnover. In view of the growing competition, your board is of the opinion that in the present year the company's profit would very likely show a downward trend. Let me hasten to assure you that your board does not take a complacent view of the situation, but on the contrary, is taking appropriate steps to meet the challenge. During the year under review, the company extended new facilities to the workers. One of these is of giving assistance for the education of their children. This has been appreciated by our workers, and it also indicates the keen interest taken by your company in the welfare of its employees. This policy has helped in maintaining cordial relations between the management and employees. Therefore, we did not have to face any labor difficulty during the year under review. This saved us from loss in production. I have great pleasure in extending to you a cordial welcome to the 10th annual general meeting of the shareholders of the company, and place before you the report of the directors and the audited balance sheet for the year ended 31st March 1982. The great advantage of early rising is the good starts it gives us in our day's work. The early riser has done a large amount of hard work before other men have got out of bed. In the early morning, the mind is fresh and there are few sounds, so that work done at that time is generally well done. In many cases, the early riser also finds time to take some exercise in the fresh morning air. This exercise supplies him with a fund of energy that will last until the evening. By beginning so early, he knows that he has plenty of time to do thoroughly all the work he can be expected to do. He is not tempted to hurry over any part of it. All his work being finished in good time, he has a long interval of rest in the evening before the timely hour when he goes to bed. He gets to sleep several hours before midnight, at the time when sleep is most refreshing. After a sound night's rest, he rises early next morning in good health and spirits for the labors of a new day. It is very plain that such a life as this is far more conducive to health than that of the man who shortens his waking hours by rising late and so can afford in the course of the day little leisure for necessary rest. Anyone who lies in the bed late must, if he wishes to do a full day's work, go on working to a corresponding late hour. He denies himself the hour or two of evening exercise that he ought to take for the benefit of his health, but in spite of all his efforts, he will probably not produce as good results as the early riser because he will miss best working hours of the day. It may be objected to this that some find the perfect quiet of midnight by far the best time for working. This is no doubt true in certain cases. Several great thinkers have found by experience that they can write best when they burn the midnight oil. But even in such cases, the practice of working late at night cannot be working at the time when nature prescribes sleep, because injury to health and have a bad effect on the quality of the work done. In presenting the report and the statement of accounts for the year which ended on the 31st March last, the chairman said, as you will have seen from the report which has been circulated to you, your company has enjoyed a record year's trading. It is particularly satisfactory to be able to state that all of our departments have contributed towards this happy result. Our sales have gone ahead